I am Rails Eve and your host for Keep Traveling Your African Vacation, the only podcast which brings you insightful information in the African tourism industry by real tourism professionals. Today is our 14th episode and I have the pleasure of introducing Scott Brown, who's Chief Operations Officer at Baines River Camp on the banks of the Zambezi River in Zambia. Welcome to the show, Scott.
Good day, Rael. Lovely to be here and thank you for having me.
Can you give me an idea as to your geographic location?
Yes, certainly, no problem. We're situated in the Chiawa Eastern Game Management Area, which is just up to the west of the Lower Zambezi National Park. It's about the closest major town centre is Chirundu town on the Zambian side. That's about 70 kilometers upstream. You can access us either by road. That's a little bit challenging. Predominantly we'll fly into one of the local airstrips. It's about a 35-minute charter hop-in from Lusaka, and then a short 25 to 30-minute drive from one of the strips into the camp. Our main access point is Royal Lower Zambezi. That's the nodal point for the valley. And that's normally about a 30-minute flight. There's various operators that service the area. Depending on the frequency of the flights for the day, you can either charter or they offer you a seat rate.
Okay, tell me about the drive, Lusaka. Are you going all the way down to Chirundu and then turning off, or are you turning off before you get to Chirundu?
No, that's correct. You're going to come down to Chirundu, then you follow the dirt road in from Chirundu. It's about 15 kilometers from Chirundu to the Kafui River Bridge. You're going to cross there, then you head about 52 kilometers downstream from there through the Western GMA. You then enter the checkpoint at Eastern GM and just follow your nose down the river.
Once you turn off from Chirundu, you're going to see any game on that road?
Yes, certainly. As soon as you pass your sort of main villages and town centres, so from Chirundu, your nearest sort of big habitation is going to be Chiawa village. Certainly once you get past Chiawa and into the sort of midpoint of the Western GMA, your game populations definitely start picking up. And then once you reach the checkpoint on the Western and Eastern GMA boundary on Kaila Farm, the game can be fantastic. It's you having your own game drive on the way through.
Do you offer any kind of pickup or collection service?
We offer a pickup service from either Gwabi Lodge or Breezes Lodge or one of the other many pickup points up there. You can pre-arrange to pick you up there if you don't fancy driving down the dirt road, and that's about an hour and a half to 2 hour boat transfer down the river, and it can also be a very pleasant experience.
So does the boat ride take you past the Nyakasanga River mouth?
Most certainly. The top end of Marnopools, you can have your Nyakasanga and that sort of area and Rakomachi, and then that will go onto your Marnopools concession. So you're basically coming on the western GMA side of Zambia and then the Nyakasanga area of Zimbabwe.
Tell me a bit more about the actual property itself, Scott. What amenities there are. Give me a bit of a rundown on that.
Yes, certainly. At Baines, we're very privileged. It's a very high-end establishment, and we've really prided ourselves in the bespoke service that we offer to our guests. It's not your average safari lodge where it's a sausage factory mentality where you have to go on a game drive at a certain time and meals are served at a certain time. It's very much guest-centric what we offer, and we try and tailor-make each stay to the guest preferences as best we can. We're very fortunate in the fact that we've also recently fully solarized the camp, so that gives you your all-important aircon 24 hours a day. There's proper connectivity in the rooms via Starlink. The food and beverage department is fantastic. Our guides are some of the best in Zambia and some of the first qualified guides in Zambia. We really have got long-standing, fantastic people in our team.
Yeah. What are you doing in respect to staff education, grassroots upliftment programs, if you like?
We're actually very involved in that sort of thing in the camp. What we typically try to do is promote within. So what we've done is a lot of our boat drivers and a lot of our guides have started off perhaps as a casual builder while we were building the camp and worked their way right up through the ranks and have expressed an interest in boat driving, and we've educated them through that or put them to the local training academies. And the more senior qualified guys definitely started in the lower ranks in the camp and have worked their way through. I mean, we've got staff that have got more than 20 years service with us and have built their way up through the ranks. Annually, we take our staff for the obligatory training that you have to maintain these Zambia licenses, and we try and upskill them as much as possible because in Zambia you're required by law to essentially start at the bottom. You get a transfer license that allows you just to drive a guest from the lodge to the airstrip. Then your natural progression from that would be a boat driving license just to ferry people from A to B. Then you'd progress to the next one would be a fishing guide. Then from there would be your general guiding, and then from there to walking and then canoeing. So it's quite a long chain to get to the top of the guiding ladder, and it does take a good few years to do it, and rightfully so, because it's not an easy environment to operate in, and you need to know what you're doing, number one, for the guest safety, and secondly, to make sure that the guest has a proper experience.
You're quite happy that when you send some guests on a walking safari with a couple of your guides, you're pretty happy that they will be coming back all in one piece, right?
Definitely. At Baines, we can pride ourselves in that we have never had one guest incident in all our years of operating. We teach our guides to be responsible, not to push the boundaries, not to be heroes, respect the animals, and give your guests the best time possible. Also, in saying that, is that you are accompanied by a National Parks guide from the Department of National Parks and Wildlife. So you double overseen on an activity.
Okay, so whenever you're going out for something like that, you have those national parks guides on call 24/7 as well?
Yes, we'll pre-arrange the activity for walking.
Now, you mentioned something about solar, so you said you become totally off-grid. Am I correct in saying that?
Yes, as best we can, we are off-grid. I'd say 99% of the time we're off-grid, unless it rains and is miserable for a very extended period, then we have a backup diesel generation system. But largely our operations are completely off-grid. It's been an absolute game changer for us in so many aspects. Just the ambient noise is gone, the carting tons of diesel down there, your biocarbon footprint has changed. It just feels like a different camp. I've been there since day one, and you're used to generators going on and off and the timings and the hassles.
Great. And tell me, are you producing some of your own produce? Is that an option?
Yeah, we do. We have a greenhouse project that we're starting at the moment, and we support some of the local village growers as well. There's a few projects that we're supporting, and also it's quite a strange staff dynamic in the valley where typically the men work in the lodges and the women will stay at home to do the growing of their own crops and procurement and raising children and such. And we try and support our staff members' wives in the villages by procuring goods from them, largely for the staff rations and for items that they are able to supply for consumption.
What role do you play as operations officer?
It's mainly the overseeing of day-to-day operations and just trying to keep your finger on the pulse of what's going on in camp to make sure everyone's where they should be and everything should be doing what it should be doing. Yeah, I've been with the company since 2007. So yeah, it's been a long stretch with the company. It's been a good go. I've been there since it was originally a tented camp that we demolished and rebuilt Baines to what it is now. So I was involved in the build and the refit. So yeah, I know the product very well from that point of view.
Do you find doing business in Zambia a lot of red tape? Do you find having to get things done is a bit of an issue, or governments seem to understand that it's important to get things done without going through a lot of red tape?
Every business, I think, has its challenges. I do think that the Department of Tourism is doing what it can to drive business essentially in Zambia. But yes, there are operating frustrations and frictional costs of business that do occur. But I suppose as much as in any other African company, you just have to find the right people to help you. And a lot of those issues you can remedy through third-party suppliers or your bigger chain accounting groups that have contacts in Department of Immigration or whatever else you might need for your permits, for your licensing and such.
You're born and bred Zambian.
No, I'm born and bred South African, but I'm a Zambian resident. I've spent my time there long enough to qualify for residency status.
What other properties or activities are included in your portfolio?
It's quite a nice little portfolio we've got. We've run and managed a large super yacht on Lake Kariba called the MV Matusadonna. She's a lovely vessel. She sleeps six. She's a 108-foot steel monohull super cruiser. She's absolutely brilliant. It's the Baines River camp that floats Kariba. And then we've got Klein Walmart Wine and Olive Estate in between Somerset West and Stellenbosch and the Cape. And that trades as Foothills Wine. So pushing quite hard to get a nice package together between Victoria Falls, Baines, the boat and the wine farm. I think it'll be a great product offering to get people certainly a soft landing in Zambia. And most guys don't do your houseboat trips and your lower Zambezi trips on your first trips to Africa. They do the box ticking where it might be Vic Falls, one of the big name parks in South Africa and perhaps Cape Town. I think just the confidence in the market in Zambia and Zim and the level of service we can offer would certainly... doesn't have to be for your hardened Africa traveler. It can certainly be for your first timers. It's an incredible product, and we are the only boat on the lake that runs the way that we do. On your high-end FIT charters, there's a full-time manager on board and typically a qualified guide as well. So you take your tender boat, you go into the Matusadonna shoreline, you can go for your walking safaris, get back on the tender and go to the boat. It's literally, the only way I can describe it is a floating safari lodge.
What do you think is the issue with trying to market 3 days in Victoria Falls, 3 days on Lake Kariba, 3 days down on the river? In your mind, what's the barrier that we have to break down?
I think largely it's product education. They don't necessarily think that you can attain that level of luxury or guest safety, I think, in those environments. And also that the travel can be a bit tricky if you don't have a good DMC or a good organizer for your trip. And the charter flights can get costly, and rightfully, because the frequency going into those areas isn't enough to warrant scheduled flights a lot of the time. So you're chartering long distances, which does push the cost up, should I say.
Do you think there's a little bit from the overseas traveler that we're going into deep, dark Africa and you may or may not be eaten by a lion or attacked?
No, I don't think so. I think largely if you're doing private charter and stuff like that, you're not actually seeing the real Africa. You're flying over most of it. You're met by a man with a cold face cloth and a lovely cooler box at every stop. You're not dealing with the grit and the grime if you were doing an overland trip or getting hassled by police at roadblocks and things like that.
You've been in the game quite a while, Scott, so if you could maybe share with us a little bit of a funny incident or story of the river.
One incident really comes to mind. It was a client that became a friend of mine, and he owns a game farm himself. He's an incredible man, and he just has the most unqualified fear of crocodiles and dangerous game and lions and things like that. And we were doing a film shoot at the camp for one of the fishing shows, and I don't know why they chose to stick him with me, but yeah, he got stuck on my boat for a week, and lo and behold, not even in the first half an hour we were on the boat, we got charged by a lion from the bank on the boat. I've never seen just sheer terror on a human being, but thankfully being on a boat there was absolutely no risk, and it just seemed after that it just almost seemed to have cured him. He just absolutely had a different understanding that when he was in a proper environment there was no risk to him. We didn't push any boundaries. It was a safe viewing, and there's no other way you could have had that experience. It just totally changed him.
Do you like spending time on the river fishing?
Tiger fishing has been a long time pursuit of mine, doing it for the sort of last 20 years and quite obsessed by it and all facets of it, from typical conventional bait fishing to making my own lures.
Are you practicing catch and release?
Most definitely. It is absolutely compulsory, especially in the national park area. That's a totally non-consumptive area. And in the game management areas, the only fish that we will use for bait would be your chester and your bream species. Other than that, all of your game fish, your tiger and your vindu and stuff like that, all go back.
I know when I am on the river, I see from time to time a lot of netting from the local fishermen. Is the community keeping that in check from becoming damaging to the fish stocks?
Most certainly. It's actually so strange that you asked that question, because Baines River Camp has been heavily involved in an initiative in the Lower Zambezi. It's been an operation called the Lower Zambezi Tour Operators Association, or the LZTA. It's not even 2 weeks ago I was up there with the owner of the camp and other stakeholders, and we met with the local governments down there, being the chieftainess. We have reached an agreement with the chieftainess and the local community resources board to safeguard the game management area that we are in. It's now going to become a totally non-consumptive area, despite the fact that it's a game management area. And there is a local population of fishermen that we are now paying and compensating to move out of the area further upstream to where netting is permitted. So we are paying them for the privilege of non-consumption, and we are really doing our best in the area up in fish stocks and wildlife that we have. Netting is permitted in Zambia in game management areas, provided that the fisherman has, number one, a license, and secondly, the right equipment. Because netting, sure, it's not great, but you can't begrudge a man a meal. But if you net in the right manner, you're not going to wipe out all the fish, because the net has to be a certain size. So it's selective. So it'll only catch fish over a certain size or under a certain size.
Do you think that's being policed enough?
How do you prove the net belongs to someone in a river? Then you confiscate it, and then it's a bone of contention, because the locals do have a right to access their natural resources. But you just need to police it in the right manner, where everybody can get what they need.
I also wonder a lot when we talk about catch and release, after you sort of land 8 or 10 or 12 pound tiger and you've had him on the line for 8 minutes, and you get him out the water, and then you take the hook out, etc., and you put him back in the water and he goes away very slowly. Do you think they all survive?
Largely, the anglers and guides need to be a bit more educated, and also that's the great thing about the training that the guys do in Lower Zam with the guiding, is that a lot of it's down to, like you said, the duration of the fight. I think a lot of the guests fish far too light to tackle, so I'd rather suggest tackling up, going to a far heavier line. If you're using a bait, using a circle hook, so you can best avoid the gut hook as possible. And a lot of it also boils down to the release. A lot of the guys put the fish gently back into the water. You must take it head first, and you bomb it in like you'd release a tuna deep sea. You need to get that flush of air over the gills. You need to get that initial oxygen going. You need to get it through that first meter or so of the barrier of resistance, of buoyancy in the water. And that typically gets them going. Well, if you can't do that, put your fish in your landing net, turn your boat nose up into the current, and you swim the fish in your net safely so you can control it. It's had a long fight. It's got time then to dissipate that lactic acid, and you can watch it swim off properly. If you're battling, go to an area where it's shallow so you can make sure it goes away. So you're not just dumping it in deep water and it pops up 50 meters downstream from you. I think if you post a bad photo on social media, you get called out on it. I mean, no one's allowed to hang fish on a boga grip anymore. Weigh them in the boga with the boga on the net, because they've got a small little membrane just below their tongue, and if you hang them up on the boga, you tear that, and it renders their tongue useless. So they will starve to death over a period if you tear it. So there is a lot more happening from the guys, and certainly the people consuming the media. Because if you post a bad picture holding a fish, you get called out on it, it's fantastic. It's the only way to. You've got to name and shame
I know that you and Baines River Camp have been very generous in offering a prize to the listeners of the podcast. Fill us in with a little bit more about the prize that you're offering.
2-night stay for two. That include your 2 drives a day, teas and coffees, and your pickup and drop off.
Fantastic. I really appreciate it, Scott. Thank you very much for coming on the show. It's been really great to talk to you, learn a little bit more about Baines River Camp, and I hope to see you myself sometime down there soon. Today I was chatting with Scott Brown, Operations Officer at Baines River Camp in Zambia on the edge of the Zambezi River. Do not forget that prize giveaway of a 2-night all-inclusive stay from Baines River Camp. All the details can be found in the show notes of this episode, or head over to www.wildsunsets.travel/podcast. If you enjoyed the show, please rate the show on Apple Podcasts or drop me an email. Tune in again next week when we will be chatting to Stefan Huggett, Leisure Sales Manager for the Newmark Group of Hotels. My name is Rails Eve, and consider this. A few years from now, you will not remember how much it cost you, but you will still remember the memories you made. Keep traveling.